Welcome everybody. Welcome to the EOcafe, where the EO community meet. This is our third year of EOcafes, the first EOcafe of 2022. I'm not sure we would have thought that when we started this. As you recall, we did so because of the COVID and the lockdowns, and try and give somewhere where people could still meet and exchange. And it seems to have been quite successful. People like it. So we enter our third year. As many of you can see, I've, in the meantime, since the last EOcafe, I've moved house and moved location. So I have a new background. I didn't realize how difficult it was to organize the background, or how lucky I was that things fell into place in my previous office. Anyway, that's a small point, but the move has gone, I won't say smoothly. Been a lot of issues, but now we're settled and making the most of it. So just a very quick reminder of the rules for the EOcafe. Please feel free to leave your cameras on, but turn your microphones off unless or until I ask you to join in. I very much would like people to join in. This is an interesting subject we have today with lots of opinions, so do feel free to join in. If you want to ask a question, please put it into the chat. We'll try to follow the chats and call you in if we can take the questions. As you know, the EOcafe lasts 45 minutes to 1 hour, and we have a fairly hard limit of 1 hour today for Jean-Jacques, but that we can carry on talking after 1 hour if people still want to hang around. So I'm very pleased to welcome Jean-Jacques Tortora to our EOcafe today. Jean-Jacques is the director of ESPI, the European Space Policy Institute, located in Vienna. I've known Jean-Jacques for many years, previously as Secretary General of Eurospace, where he succeeded Alain Gobert in the past. But in 2016, he became director of ESPI. ESPI itself was founded in 2003 with the objective to provide European analysis and strategic thinking to help Europe develop its policies and evolve its policies in space. So ESPI is coming up next year for its 20th anniversary, which I imagine will be celebrated in some way. So ESPI is a think tank looking at developing analysis and pictures on strategic topics, and that's where we want to head today. So that's why I'm particularly looking forward to discussion with Jean-Jacques. The end of the year or the start of the new year is always a time for reflection. How did we do? How are we going to do next year? And to reset or to reaffirm the strategy for companies, or indeed for policymakers as well. Space has been developing a very high level of interest. The evolution of the space sector is moving at a pace. I think 2021 has really seen some big changes that we'll come on to. And what we want to do is see in the end how that impacts on the EO sector. So as I said, 2021 saw a lot of activities, new interest, new actors coming into the game, or at least developing the position that they've been promising. I think there's been a large awareness raising in 2021, possibly through the space tourism effect and some of the high profile players coming in there, and people going into orbit for longer or shorter times. There were 145 launches, which is a little more than the average over the last 20, 30 years. So again, a lot happening. And so I want to explore some of these issues with Jean-Jacques and really to dig into his knowledge of the sector and his appreciation of what's going on at the geostrategic level. So Jean-Jacques, very welcome to to join us. Maybe I gave an introduction. Do you want to say a few words at the beginning before we get into the meat of the discussion?
No, I think that okay. Your introduction was very, very kind, and very. Thank you very much for your kind words, and thanks for reminding me of all these years that have passed away, and the picture that you have displayed of me just painfully reminded me of that. But no, beside that, I would like to thank you very much for having me today. Always a pleasure to collaborate with Earth, which has been tremendously developing over the last few years, and actually, I would say, bringing up all the, I would say, the key issues of the sector that you're representing, the remote sensing companies. But the remote sensing companies are a lot about the commercialization of space that you want to maybe to discuss in greater detail today, and all the issues that this area is facing are quite representative of the overarching problems that we'll have to solve in the near future. And no, thank you very much for having me, and looking forward to a lively and stimulating discussion with you tonight.
And I know you're keeping very busy, so thank you for your time today. So, I mean, let's start off at the geostrategic level, because, I mean, we see space powers taking a stronger index, China becoming more and more at the forefront of developments, and asserting themselves more and more alongside the US. Russia are always there, maybe struggling a little bit with their positioning. Many other countries are pursuing an interest in space, and I saw a figure the other day that now 28 countries have regulations around space, which is astonishing. It's quite a large number. So Europe has a very special place in this. How do you perceive Europe fitting into this picture now?
Yeah. Well, I think this is the key question, and I agree with you that the space sector is under deep transformation. But let's maybe try to identify and to elaborate a bit more on what are the changing factors at the moment in space. I would first, I would say that the key factor which has allowed for all this transformation that we see ongoing is the higher degree of maturity of technology and of industry, which in turn make space much more accessible. And access to space and the barrier of access to space has for decades been a showstopper. And many efforts have been made to break this barrier everywhere in the world, and in particular in the United States. They have tried a number of things, including the reusable technologies back in the 90s or so. But in the end, I would say access to space is still conditioned by some I would say physical laws that we cannot change. Physics is here and quite stubborn, if I may. And access to space is still a matter of being able to concentrate a lot of energy and in the launchers, and this has not drastically changed. And actually, this easier or broader access to space has not been achieved through any kind of really technological breakthrough, but mostly through radicalization of the optimization at industrial level. And the best example I would give of that is what SpaceX did. There is no innovation in the SpaceX launchers, putting the reusability aside, which might not be that much at stake regarding their increase of competitiveness. But what they have done is just reusing proven solutions and radically optimizing the production and the production line of their launchers. And this has decreased the access, the cost of access to space by a significant amount. And this has made it quite accessible. And this has been also stimulating a lot of initiative throughout the world. So space has become more accessible. As a consequence, we had a lot of new players in space. So private players, private companies having a lot of initiative, and we see a tremendous number of initiatives going all over the planet, but also public actors. Now, UN Copios, you have reached 100 members, which is quite impressive. And as you stated, 28 countries having now a national legislations about space. This is all about that. Now space is accessible to many more players. And the multiplication of players, the multiplication of projects creates some additional pressure on space resources. And we might come back to that later if you want to address the security issues, because this has some consequences. But the third consequence that he had is the growing interest of the private sector in space, because space is more accessible, the space is more affordable, and actually now you have private actors like SpaceX have the capacity to, in full autonomy, develop and master the development, master the manufacturing and the deployment of major space infrastructure. And this is a game changer. Well, I'm fond of the James Bond movies, you know, and in the James Bond movies, you have very often the bad guy who is a fancy billionaire investing his fortune in I would say, crazy space systems. It's very often about space systems, by the way. And when you watch the movie, okay, you know that in the real life, this is not possible because development of such systems requires the strengths and all the capacity of governments. And I think that the demonstration that Mr. Elon Musk has made with SpaceX is that these times are over. Now, space is accessible to private players fully, and we have now a growing number of private initiatives, because it's not only about industry, it's also about investors. And investors now have spotted space as a potential area of profitable business. And the last the last consequences that it has is, of course, the multiplication of new systems, and that, like the mega constellations, for instance, and in terms of new applications that I would expect. That has not happened really yet, but I would expect that some new applications will come along the deployment of these systems. So actually, this is a major transformation, and for me, the origin and the enabling factor of that is the increased maturity of technology and of industry. And what I observe is that on the other side of the Atlantic, I tend to be very, I would say, careful about what's going on there. I think that the US administration, federal administration, has really looked into how they could take advantage of that. So not only they have encouraged a number of these initiatives, but they have also totally changed their mindset regarding procurement for a number of things that they need. And they have entered into a number of what we would call here public-private partnerships or agreements, which basically consist in long-term commitments and in positioning themselves as anchor customers. And anchor tenancy is really something which is of essence there. So in the meantime, what happened in Europe? I would say not much. We observe here kind of not a resistance to change, but just a belief in the fact that there is a stability of role of the various players. We still here in Europe rely very much on governments funding institutional programs, in governments supporting their industry through the R&T programs, public R&T programs, but these public R&T programs, they address mostly the upstream early stages of the development. There is, okay, there are a number of reasons for that, because of course it's mostly about supporting paper works and analysis, which allows you to cover a wide range of activities, which is fine. You could also reasonably say that through that you address the long-term future, which is your role. And then you also safely and comfortably keep away from, I would say, interfering with the markets. So there are a lot of good reasons for that. But when we say at the same time that we want to support the competitiveness of industry, and then we refrain from really supporting industry when their activities get close to the market, there is a kind of a contradiction. And this strategy of supporting the upstream early stages of R&T are certainly used to be a very good recipe. Now, I believe that this might be revisited. And this also goes along with a number of, I would say, permanent concerns regarding, for instance, as I said, the reluctance to interfere or to take the risk of interfering with the markets, with also the reluctance in long-term commitments. When I say that in the US, you had these new procurement schemes, I think most of them are based on long-term commitments. Basically, the federal administration stating, I commit to procure your services if you manage to deploy and to make the demonstration that they are operational.
Yeah, it's a message. It's a message we've been delivering for some time, yes, about buy services rather than infrastructure. But I want to come back to Europe a little bit later. But with these strong geostrategic, maybe we'll talk about military ambitions in future. We're seeing a number of countries setting up sort of space commands or space arms, which are very close to the military chain, even in the US as well. But at the same time, we have far more commercial activity. And these sit a bit uneasy with each other, don't they? I mean, we had an incident recently where Starlink, the Chinese were complaining because one of or two of the satellites were threatening to interfere with the space station. There was a threat to the International Space Station as well. So commercial interests are not always sitting easily with geostrategic interests. And as space is such a I use the word playground, but it's the wrong word really, but an area of interest for military and for national pride, strategic interests. How does this sit with the commercialization that's going on?
Well, I would say that the rising or increasing tensions that we note on the global geopolitical context is a reality. Okay, now, like it or not, we have to I would say, to account for that. I'm probably would agree with me that I much preferred the time where space was just about fancy projects that everybody would be very happy to support for the development of the peaceful use of space. But now this is a reality that we have to face. It is here and it is here to stay and potentially to grow. And here we have two things. I think that what could we, or what should we expect from our policymakers here? I think that, as you rightly pointed out, they cannot be disassociated one from the other. And one of the key missions, I believe, of the institutions into ensure a safe and secured environment for the business and industry and business and commerce to be able to grow. There can be no business without a secure environment. And this is the role of the institutions to ensure that. Now, how this is, I would say, this is a broad and a very general question. We have several issues to deal with. The first one is, of course, the congestion of orbits. Actually, the space, as I said previously, the multiplication of systems puts a lot of pressure on space resources. And the previous generations, or when we were younger, we believed that space is infinite. And what we are realizing today is that, okay, I'm kidding, but space is not, it is infinite, but the useful space that we exploit commercially is not infinite. And not only it's not, but we are now reaching a bit the limits of what we can expect from that. So this congestion of orbits creates a number of problems. So multiplication of debris, as you said, debris or not, it's a management of also of the traffic. There are not only debris up there, and we have two different approaches possible there. The first one is legal, and you can have the currently, we deal with that through soft law discussed in the UN, United Nations, UN Copernicus in Vienna, and then that member states commit to apply, and it's based on goodwill and adherence to what was agreed. We could also consider some more binding measures. And at the moment, there is a strong resistance against that. I don't believe that we will see any kind of binding measures in the near future. But the problem is that these discussions, as I said, it can only be global. And the place for that is the United Nations. And the problem for Europe is, how could we speak with a loud voice there? Because at the moment, all the European member states, they go there individually. So the good point is that Europe as a whole has some 20, voting rights there, which is a lot in this domain, given that you have 100 members. But are there these votes coordinated? Would the way of Europe be, I would say, stronger if all European countries agreed together to speak with one voice? I don't know. There are many areas to explore, and I would expect that to become one of the key issues to be discussed among the member states.
So that's the issue of governance at the global level, because I mean, I'm reminded of past colonizations when yes, there was a lot of commercial activity going back into the 18th, 19th centuries, a lot of discovering that new products, new services, and as soon as there was a trouble, the reaction was to send a gunboat. To send the military in, and we seem to be headed the same way here. If there are commercial interests which are threatened by I don't know, overcrowding of an orbit or a new system being put in place by another nation, how's that going to play out? If Elon Musk's SpaceX is trying to pursue a project which is counter to the interests of the Chinese or other, I shouldn't really just pick on China, but other nations, how's that going to be resolved? Are we looking at space wars maybe?
Well, space war
not.
for commercial purposes, I don't believe in so. But just to conclude on the commercial thing, on the military thing, I'm sorry. I think that at the moment in Europe, only France has really taken an initiative to create a space force to ensure the protection of their interests in orbit. Now, at European level, this is, I would say, a question that will cannot be avoided. They will need to address that because I don't believe that that France will ensure the security and the protection of all European, I would say, space assets on its own. So at some point, some broader initiative will need to be made. So how? Will it be a multiplication of national initiatives? Maybe. Will it be a European initiative? Maybe. We don't know. But this is another, I think, area of development of the European space policy in the near future.
Yeah.
And actually, when you raised this question of the commercialization of space, I think that it goes along with the pressure on the space resources. Since space resources now are limited, then we have to be very clear on the way we will going to share them. As I said, it has deep implications on the way we deal with space at international relations level. We do not sit around the table of negotiation when the point is to discuss how we are going to share an infinite resource, and when it's about how we are going to share a finite resource. Absolutely not the same. And this change is just taking place at the moment. And it's all about the commercialization of space. We hear a lot about that at the moment. And I think that this commercialization of space is broader than what we used to mean by the space business a few years ago, because it's all about the exploitation of space resources. And there is a need for an in-depth reflection on this. First, to define what is space economy, what is the perimeter of the space economy. Do you know the GPS receivers in your cell phone should they account for being part of the space business or not? There were endless discussions in the past on that. We, at the moment, have several models. The United States have their own. OECD have developed their own at the moment. And Europe should have, I believe, should have its own model of assessing what the space economy is. At the moment, we don't have one single figure for that. And also to define what are, and to have an opinion, at least an opinion, on what are the conditions for a fair competition. And here I would like maybe to stress an initiative that ESA has made recently together with ESPI. We are partnering with them on that, which is the creation of the European Center for the Space Economy and Commerce. So it was just been created 1st of January, and we will start activities on that. So it will be hosted by ESPI, which will ensure the secretariat. And the idea is to create a forum of persons, of institutes, of industry that are active or interested in space economy, to promote knowledge and common understanding of a number of the key parameters and the key things that I mentioned, to encourage interdisciplinary exchanges between economists, engineers, scientists, lawyers, to encourage also stimulate university research, provide exchange of information and ideas through the organization of events, and a number of things. So the model on that is really the model of the European Center for Space Law. And I'm very happy to make this announcement tonight. And definitely this is really about that. What is about space commerce? What are the conditions for that? How far can we consider it is fair today, and what should be the limits that we could envisage for that?
That's really interesting. I mean, the definition of the perimeter, as you say, is fundamental. I mean, I've talked in the past about pyramids and sort of different pyramids in different sectors, but I think the value of the space economy comes through its exploitation. It's everyone's interested in the building of the rockets, in the building of the satellites, the building of the space stations, the transporters to go to Mars or revisit the moon. But that only makes sense if there's value created as a result of it. So if the center is looking at the space economy, what will be the balance between the dare I say the upstream activity and the exploitation downstream?
Oh, I don't have a reply
right.
to this question yet.
I put it on the table for.
This is one of the key questions that we would consider. Yes, for the CSE, we need to reflect on that. We need to have to agree on key figures. At the moment, really, there is no consensus on how we should weigh the various respective activities in different areas of space. Yeah.
As you mentioned earlier about sort of the European model of investing in infrastructure and the US model sort of investing in services, which we really buy into. But whilst there's the investment in infrastructure, the focus remains on that infrastructure and not on its exploitation. And certainly many times in the past, I think we've had the discussion about the need to start off with what the mission is going to achieve and the exploitation of that mission, rather than starting off, well, we want to build this technology for the sake of building this next slightly better telescope or whatever it might be. Yeah. So it needs to be, I think, quite a reflection there in the approach.
Yeah, and it reminds me of a number of discussions I had back in the time I was with Eurospace, when I tried to promote some programs or public investments in space to some say parliamentarians or policymakers, and very often the question which was asked to me was, but what is the return on investment that I can expect? And I think a parliamentarian asking you about the return on investments, it's something which I would say is typically European. I never heard that in the United States, and usually my reply to them was that, okay, would I have a guaranteed return on investment? I will not be visiting you. I would be visiting a bank, and this is all about that. I think when you mention infrastructure, space infrastructure, there are some public space infrastructure that should continue to be funded through European programs. So it's about science, not only, and this is where sometimes I would say the boundaries are a bit tricky to define between what should remain public and what should and could be considered as a private and commercial. But basically, we should never have policymakers asking such kind of questions. There are some public investment that are here for the sake of, I would say, the presence of Europe in space. I think that to some extent, I would make a parallel with what happens in defense, for instance. If Europe decides or if a government decides that they need a defense, they don't ask what kind of return on investment they would get out of that. They decide that they need a defense, whatever. It's a political decision. I need that. I pay for that. I don't ask the question if it's how much should it cost, and if I'm not saying that they should not care about the value of the public expenditure, but I'm saying that this is not a question that you answer in terms of return on investment. And I would say that to some extent, I would like now Europeans to have the same approach to space, because this is about the same. If Europe decides that they want to be active in space, then they should be ready to invest in space without asking the question of the return on investment. And this, I think, is something, there is room for improvement here, because this business thing and the development of business has been really one of the key parameters and the key drivers for the development of say, Europe in space and European activity and European industry. And it was all triggered by the tremendous success of Ariane and then the European space industry in the SATCOM sector. And we were so happy with the success that we had here that we made it, I would say, the core of our strategy. And actually, okay, the success that we had with Ariane 4 and with Ariane 5 in next, but the success that we had at that time was not only because we have been quite good and effective in the development, etc., but there were a number of factors, okay, that made it possible. First, that the US at that time had invested in the shuttle. There was the boom of the telecom sector, where no commercial other launcher was available other than Ariane. The Russians were still behind the Iron Wall. The Chinese were not there. So we were in a monopoly at the time where the market was booming. But we were so successful that we tend to believe that it was just our merit, and we want this miracle to happen again. But actually, the conditions are not there. The conditions will not be met anymore, I guess, in the near foreseeable future. And now we should get back to the basics, which is you want to be active in space, then, okay, access to space, it comes along with a price tag that we should be ready to pay.
I think the European policy was very successful up until a few years ago. It's developed a very strong capability, world-leading capability. I would defend our the Earth observation sector, but we're seeing now strong competition emerging from elsewhere through different policies. Some very governmental led, dirigiste, even we could say, and others much more free market, but with this pull of defining a service that's required and then going out and procuring the service. So Europe needs to rethink. What do you see happening there? You mentioned earlier, or maybe it was before we started, your activity, your involvement in the preparation of the conference in Toulouse next month. How will that help change things? What's going to be happening at European level to help change some of these issues for Europe and for European industry?
Well, at the moment, there is one initiative, I think, that maybe is worth mentioning here. Beside, I would say, the ongoing activities of the agency on its side and of the European Commission on their side. So the European Commission, for the time being, you have this MFF going on for 8 years. So we know what we can expect for the next few years. And on top of that, there is Commissioner Breton really very active in promoting the next, what might be the next flagship program for the European Union through this secure connectivity constellation, which, if it happens, will be a major I would say, a source of activity for the European industry for a few years. ESA on its side is continuing, I would say, its activities, but the one thing that and preparing the next ministerial council next year. But the one thing that I would like to highlight today is maybe this this concept of accelerator that the ESA Director General is pushing forward, which is quite interesting because it's based on the assumption that space resources, space-based services and data are not fully exploited or to the full extent, that there is room for improvement here. And in order to address 3 areas that he has spotted, one is I would say the green development of the green future, which is how to better predict and anticipate climate change and the consequences of climate change, which is the key driver there. The second is about the protection of space assets in orbit. We have already discussed that, I guess. And the third one is about putting together a number of, I would say, individual and coordinated initiatives in order to be able to come up with what they call a rapid resilience response system. And the point here is to really target the crisis management situation, and then to ensure that final users in the field will be granted information. And I'm not talking about data, I'm talking about information, useful information for them, quickly as they need, and in a resilient manner, because in crisis management you must ensure that you have systems that are resilient and still available and operational in a degraded environment. And for that, the idea is to put together a number of initiatives. There are plenty of initiatives going on at national, regional level, also from the private sector, from the public sector. And all of this is happening in a totally uncoordinated manner. And the idea would be to limit the risk of duplication of efforts, and to come up with a joint, common, overarching infrastructure where each and every initiative might fit, in order to ensure that the final user, in such cases, the final users gets maximum and ideal access to, I would say, much and most of the available resources.
We were talking earlier about need for revision to the governance, and probably a stronger European effort, which could bring us back. I don't want to go down that path at the moment, but the relationship between ESA and the European Commission, which I think will strongly improve now. But picking up on a question that Emmanuel Mondon has asked in the chat, there are two events this year: the Toulouse conference under the French presidency, and there will be an ESA ministerial at the end of the year. What do you see as being the priorities there? How will that move forward, this question of, organizing Europe and revitalizing the effort in Europe?
Well, I'm not sure that's
in your opinion, of course. I mean,
not sure that I can really reply here. As I said, I mentioned the accelerator. I think that the accelerator is really, for me, the most innovative and I would say groundbreaking, if I may, initiative that ESA will bring forward. But no, there are a number of other, of course, developments of programs, which will be proposed to the member states, mostly at the ESA Ministerial Council at the end of the year. And at the Space Summit, the accelerators will be discussed, but I think it's not exactly a Space Summit as it was initially envisioned, because Emmanuel, that I would like to say hello today. Thank you for your question. You were making reference to an executive brief that SPS published. It was a while ago when we were get first, I would say, advanced information about the Space Summit. And initially, the idea was to have together, the European Commission, ESA, and member states, and having really a full summit. And now this has been, for many reasons I will not comment, split in two parts. There will be one part which will be a competitive council with the EC and EU member states, and another part which will be with ESA member states. And as you know, they are not exactly the same perimeters anymore. And I cannot really make any comment on that. There is a lot of I would say reflections going on, and okay, I don't have any personal view other than what I said about the accelerators.
Herman Westerbecker is asking a question which also links to the government's governance of space and what industry can do. Herman, do you want to come in?
Yes, and hello everyone. Well, I tried to also switch my camera on, which is not succeeding right away. Yeah, my point was really sort of a perhaps a quite high level, top level one. I said that since World War II, you know, we have actually as humanity maintained some level of international cooperation. We had our good times, we had our bad times, and it has enabled a lot of commercial operations from space. You need that basis, and ITU, the frequency coordination. We wouldn't have satellite communication be such a success if we global satellite communication if we didn't have the ITU to coordinate the frequencies through, despite everybody's personal experiences, including mine, with the ITU process of doing so. Now, if you look at the treaties we have, the organizations who look at all the various aspects, and you sort of overlay that with what's happening in space now, you know, and provides a basis for commercial activities, what's coming up right now, and also what's sort of in the pipeline for the future, mining of asteroids and so on. Where do you think should the attention be? Where is the weakest point in all those treaties and organizations, and what is perhaps not yet in place? And as an industry, what should we undertake as action right now? Of course, through organizations like ERSC and other industry bodies to get a point across, but also outside that.
Okay. Well, I will try to make my reply short. I could spend the rest of the day elaborating on these questions. No, first about the treaties. I think that the baseline, as I said, is the non-binding agreements to which the UN COPUOS members or member states adhere and translate into their national law and registration. So this non-binding approach, I think, for me, might be critical. In the long term, I guess that one day or another we will have to come up to with some kind of binding regulation, but for the time being, it's totally excluded. There are a number of good reasons for that. The first one is that the major big powers, space powers, United States prominently, are favoring their freedom of access into space. They want to be able to do whatever they believe is needed to ensure the protection of their interests in space, no matter what, not negotiable. And they consistently, and this is the position that they have since the 60s, they systematically oppose to any kind of binding measures. So the other major space powers are more or less Russia, China, along the same line. Sometimes, okay, they would I would say, consider that some binding measures might be a way to limit or to reduce the competitive advantage that the US have in space, but basically they're on the same line. And at the other end of the spectrum, you have all the small and new emerging countries, which actually agree with that because they don't want to be imposed more stringent rules than those that were applicable to the earlier comers. And they say, okay, you were able to access to space in certain conditions. I want the same, and I would not accept to make them more difficult for me. And you have this agreement at both ends of the spectrum, and you have in the middle I would say middle space powers. And typically a lot of European countries, or plus Japan, plus to some extent Canada, who would be much more open to considering binding measures or more, I would say, stringent rules. But actually they are a minority, and I don't expect that this will change in the near future. And the weakness, so this is for me the major weakness. Second weakness is the fact that Now we are subject to interpretation of these treaties. You know, there are a few things that that were, I would say, envisioned or written in a certain manner, and when at the time the treaties were written, were elaborated, these were theoretical things or issues. But when, of course, you come to reality, to application, and then you are confronted with a number of cases that were not envisioned, or specific cases that need to be accounted for. And in the normal life, I would say, this is the role of the jurisprudence. And this happens with every legal text. And this is the role of jurisprudence. Now, for jurisprudence, if you want jurisprudence to be possible and to be active, you need an authority that decides and that says, okay, this is the way the text should be interpreted. This is the way it should read. The problem is that in the case of our treaties, we have no authority. And then we have no jurisprudence. And then we have, I would say, interpretation. And for instance, when it comes to commercialization of space, the United States, they came up with their US Space Act. And this is their interpretation of the treaty. Fine, good work they did. Nothing to complain about that. And then you have, I don't know, Luxembourg. They came up with their interpretation of the treaty. Not exactly the same, slightly different. But actually, what is the way forward? Should each and every individual country now come up with their interpretation? And you talked about cooperation. How in the longer term, how are we going to be able to collaborate and to cooperate together in space if we have different interpretation of the basic treaty? This is, for me, the major issue.
Major challenge.
And I think that, well, what we could envisage, what we could consider would be to set up a group of experts that would define the way the treaties should read and clarify a number of things that are unclear or that were not envisioned. But for that, you need really unanimity. And once again, unanimity for the time being, I don't believe it will happen.
Yeah, so in essence, you were saying we just continue treading carefully as we have so far, and we still haven't, or countries haven't annoyed each other enough for the whole thing to blow up. But you're then also saying, as soon as one of those countries says, mea culpa, who cares, and you know, does take that step, then either that just shifts everything a bit and we continue to tiptoe, or that's the beginning of the end. So, oh well, the future. It will take
a major.
I want to be optimistic. I want to be optimistic. We will find a way.
We'll work on it. Emmanuel, I want to bring Emmanuel Mondon in now. He's put a number of things into the chat. But can I first pick up on? It was a point we touched upon earlier, but maybe you develop a bit further in your direction about the applications being a pull on the upstream sector and for investment in new infrastructure. Emmanuel, is he still with us? Has he left?
Oh, he had plenty of questions. Yes.
Yeah, he always does. He always does. No, he's still here. Come on, Emmanuel. What's going on?
Good afternoon. Happy New Year.
Oh, you're there. Good.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you too.
Hey, Jeff. 6 minutes left. It's too short for all the questions I ask.
It's too. These sessions are always too short, but you have to make the most of it. Go on. I've given you the floor.
Thanks. So one very super quick question. The upcoming European Space Summit, mid-February in Toulouse, will it be open to anyone, including myself, or restricted to a happy few?
I have no clue on that. Personally, I will not attend. I'm not invited. No, I guess it's not a public event. And I don't know, maybe it will be streamlined. Maybe, I don't know. It's an event organized by the French Presidency, and they are the ones deciding on that. No, I'm sorry, I have no information on this.
Okay, no, super, thanks. Then a much more complex one. I'm deeply involved in what I'm calling data space. So codename GaiaX, IDSA, European Common Data Spaces, blah, 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 blah. By the way, Jeff, reminder, you should set up an EOcafe related to data spaces. Done. And
always ask for ideas.
And I'm working on a space data space, which is, besides the funny name, will be a kind of data space gathering information, data collected from space assets in order to enable a real application, downstream services, real business, having real benefits, economic and social. Would you be interested in supporting such a crazy idea? And last but not least, you mentioned the 3 ESA accelerators. Thanks a lot. I put the link in one of my questions. This space data space could enable and make use of these 3 accelerators. End of the questions.
Okay. So I don't know, the first question, is it addressed to Jeff or is it addressed to me? Because I think he's much more relevant on this one. But no, definitely space data. Well, we could, the points that I made about the accelerators is that they should deal with space information or space-based information and not with space data. And the key question is, how do we transform or turn into the space data into usable and useful information for the final users? So at the moment, this is something which is dealt with as a business, and we have a number of remote sensing companies who are making a business of that, and this is a great thing. Now, when it comes to crisis management, and the accelerator that I mentioned is about that. Crisis management, it's a lot of I don't know, institutions, organizations like firemen, like I don't know, the lawyers monitoring the I would say and break of the human rights or the what happens with the refugees in some areas. All of these organizations, they need space data, but how should they get access to the information they need? Should they, all of them, in-house develop the expertise for that, or should we consider something more, central that could work at the service of all of them? Should we consider that and put this on as a commercial service to be provided to all of them? All of these are key questions that need to be addressed, and that have never really been addressed. And I'm talking here about some very specific use of space-based data for crisis management in extreme, I would say, cases where we must make sure that the lack of expertise should not be a showstopper to prevent could prevent the use of a satellite and the support of satellite infrastructure to the management of such crises. This is for me an open question at the moment. Yeah. So I would support your initiative, which goes along these lines. Yeah.
So is this a topic that SB would look at and analyze and come up with a perspective for Europe and contextually in the international arena?
I would say why not? At the moment, it's not in our work plan for 2022, but would our members request us to pay some thought about that, I would be happy to do. And it also depends on the development of the accelerator. But would this R3 rapid response and resilient response accelerator move forward and be approved by the member states, then this would be a key question to address. And yes, probably I would.
And I guess the way to that is through the is it 14 members of ESPI?
Yeah. A bit more now, but
okay. Good.
Yeah.
Okay. So we would need to take it up through sort of national representatives to ESPI to say, okay, this is a topic that we would like to see addressed, and persuade them. Okay. And Andy Coote has pointed out.
And I'm sorry, I've reached the end of my slot.
It's 5 o'clock. Yeah.
It's 5
okay. Okay. Well, thank you very much for being with us. Please, everyone online, please feel free to stay on, and we can address questions and discuss that amongst ourselves. Jean-Jacques, it's been a pleasure having this discussion with you. It's a shame that we have to stop, but all good things have to come to an end. So please, I'll let you go off to your next meeting, and thank you again for joining us in the EOcafe.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure, and looking forward to the next opportunity.
Yeah, and us as well. Yeah. Good.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.